Well, I'm joined on the morning program by Gerald Celente. Of course, Gerald's familiar to this program for his predictions, and he's the author of the Trends Journal. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, you're predicting that we could be pulling out of Afghanistan just to get ready to go into another war zone.
Well, they're not going to really pull out. What they're going to do is they're going to stay in and pretend they pull out like they're doing in Iraq. There's still a major military presence there and tens of thousands of mercenaries. Oh, excuse me. We have to call them military contractors. How polite we must be. And so they're going to do the same thing in Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, our defense secretary was in Australia recently meeting with your prime minister. And the word is, of course, that you, the taxpayer, that may have difficulty making ends meet, gasoline prices too high, job isn't paying enough, having trouble meeting the mortgage or paying the rent, more of your money is going to be donated via your prime minister, along with the United States and several other nations, to keep supporting the Afghan massacre that's been going on now for 11 years, for at least another 10.
So why do you think, though, that Iran is going to be the next war zone? What's the reason that you're predicting this?
Well, the reason is that it's unreasonable people, obviously, but the reason is look what the major news has been lately. Hey, those North Koreans were going to send up a rocket into space, and you look at the set that they had; it looked like an erector set that kids put up. And, of course, it didn't go anywhere, but yet they kept fear and hysteria into the media for how long? Over a week. And then, just by the way, several days ago, India launched a ballistic missile that's capable of hitting Shanghai and Beijing. Hey, how come that wasn't headline news day after day? Same thing goes back to Iran. You need somebody to hate in a world filled with psychopaths and money junkies. Excuse me, I should use the proper language. Bankers, presidents, and prime ministers that are leading their countries to war. You know, I just got back from Berlin. And what you see there, you can see the destruction of war. You see beautiful buildings from the 1800s and early 1900s that were built, and then new construction, since the end of World War II. And I kept saying to myself as I saw these blocks after blocks of these fill-in buildings between the old ones, what does it take people to say, no, I'm not going to follow the leader anymore? And the leaders are leading us to war. Israel is leading us to war. The United States, oh, by the way, as I speak, a new executive order from El Presidente Los Estados Unidos. I say that because it's turning into a banana republic. They can now target predator drones. They're going into Yemen. They're not even identifying who the, quote, suspected militants are. They're not even giving them a name anymore. Only if the face is wrong, then they could blow them away. I'm not making this up. This is in the news.
We're talking to Gerald Celente, the author of the Trends Journal, about his predictions for what's looking like more war on the horizon. One of the things, of course, that we've seen in recent times is the US presidential race underway. Now, just say, for example, a Republican wins there. Is it going to be a stronger chance of America going to war with Iran than if Obama held on?
Not at all. Look at Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Double the troop strength in Afghanistan to 100,000, tripled it, to 100,000 people, over 100,000. He started that lovely little war, that humanitarian mission in Libya without getting consent of Congress. He has, as I mentioned, they're going to be extending the war in Afghanistan, sending predator drones into Yemen, into Pakistan. No, it's a two-headed one-party system. So there's not going to be any difference in who gets elected. It's a syndicate, and it's just a different mob leader is the way I look at it. I'm a political atheist. I've been around too long. I worked in government. I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. I was in Washington, D.C. for 7 years. I know who they are. I know what it looks like, and it's more of the same.
In your latest Trends Journal, you do point out the fact that the Israelis have an extremely powerful lobby group in the US that can, I suppose, paint Iran as the new bogey. But is there any evidence that's coming through from, say, the CIA that Iran does want to, as they often quote, wipe Israel out? I mean, and therefore there is some case to be worried about what's happening in Iran?
No, and it's rhetoric, by the way. A threat is one thing, action's another thing. How many nuclear weapons does Israel have? An estimated 300 to 400. How many nuclear weapons does Iran have? They may be able to build one in several years. How many bases are surrounding Iran from the United States in Afghanistan, in Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet, in Saudi Arabia, in Iraq? Iran is encircled by the United States and with Israel near it. If Iran did anything, they would turn the country into glass. They're no match for anybody else. And the other point of this, too, is that from the information, and anybody could do it, they could do their own research, Ahmadinejad did not say that they were going to wipe Israel off the map. From all of the interpretations that I've seen of what he said. And here's one for you. You know, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. How about that one? So no, I don't believe... remember the Vietnam War? You know, that lovely little war that the Aussies were involved in as well, that killed about 3 million Vietnamese. Oh, you remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident when the Vietnamese fired on the American destroyers? Oh, you don't remember that? Probably because it never happened and they made it up. So why would anybody believe what politicians are telling them? These are nothing more than psychopaths and sociopaths. By their deeds you shall know them.
Is the old theory true then that because America has built up a massive industry based around armaments, based around the building of weapons, that therefore if you've got all this there, you have to use it from time to time? So if you start withdrawing from Afghanistan, then you've got to find another place to use those weapons and keep the machine rolling along. Is that the way you see it?
Let's listen to what a 5-star general, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces during World War II, 2-term Republican President, Dwight D. Eisenhower, as he leaves office in 1960, he warns the American people at the height of the Cold War that the military-industrial complex is taking over the nation, robbing it of the genius of the scientists, sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. This is what. Who would go over to Eisenhower and say you're full of baloney? I mean, and then people just forget what this guy said. It's a takeover. Look, we lost $1 trillion, 5,000 men, hundreds of thousands ruined for life in the Iraq War, 1 million dead, built on false premises. Obama has escalated the Afghan war. Every couple of weeks there's a new atrocity. And they're blaming these soldiers for flipping out after they've done several tours of duty, fighting in a foreign occupied land where the people don't want them. And then they say, well, this isn't the behavior that we should be exhibiting. Not the behavior. You taught these kids to hate the enemy. You've been bombing the hell out of them. You invaded a foreign country. And then the people that send them there, the generals, the politicians, they're exonerated, and the kids that lose their mind, they're persecuted.
Well, Gerald Celente, at the end of the Vietnam War, there was a big movement for peace, and obviously the American people said that they'd had enough at that stage. And, peace did break out for a short time. Is it likely that at the moment, because we're seeing a similar situation, a lot of damaged men coming home, a lot of body bags coming home, that the American people will say, look, we don't want to go into another war zone just yet, thank you very much?
Number one, I just mentioned President Obama involved the Americans in the Libyan war without even asking Congress. Number two, and I'm a Vietnam veteran, Vietnam age. I was born in 1946. I was prime draft meat during those days. And the only reason that there were protests in the streets is because of the draft. There were no major protests with Afghanistan, no major protests with Iraq. When the people's lives aren't on the line and they could get poor kids to go do the fighting for them, or people that need jobs and join the service to get one, they don't care. There's no protest in this country.
We're talking to Gerald Celente from the Trends Research Institute about his latest predictions. One of the things that we're seeing is the American economy really in probably the worst state it's been in for decades. Could that also then be a force in saying, well, look, we need this money to fix problems at home. We can't just keep spending, as you say, trillions of dollars on the military complex?
Well, that's a very intelligent question. But you don't have intelligent people to ask that question to in politics. Of course. Look, we've spent over $13 trillion fighting the Cold War. Could you imagine what America would have looked like with $13 trillion? And we've probably spent more than that since, with making armaments that go into graveyards and sending people that go into graveyards with them. So, no, you're talking logic. And what politics is not logic. These are people, you know what the politicians are? They're the same people you couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council. The suck-ups, the brown noses, the glad-handers, the overly ambitious, the insincere. That's who they are. There's a word now. They call it career politicians. Could you imagine that? Someone who's never worked a day in their lives, that's been sucking off the public tit for most of their lives, and never really having to work for a living. All their expenses are paid, and they tell other people what to do. It's high school. That's all it is.
It doesn't give us much. It doesn't give us much hope. But if you look to the south of America, in Central America, there is a little country there called Costa Rica, which I understand in the 1950s or around that time decided it would give up its military forces because they thought, well, there's not much point in keep paying it. And apparently they've developed quite well. So there is an example of a country where you can say, look, let's not spend the money on armaments or armies and spend it the other way. Would you think that could ever possibly happen, even to a mild degree in America?
It could happen everywhere, but it's up to the people, not the politicians. You know that saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears? Anybody that's really practiced at anything knows the difference between a mediocre teacher and a great one. When you're ready, that you find the teacher. When the people are ready, the leadership will appear. And the people aren't ready. You know, they're dancing with the stars. The Kardashians just signed a $40 million agreement with TV. You look at what's going on. We have a presidential reality show. It's no different than watching American Idol. So the people aren't ready. And when people have the courage, the dignity, the self-respect, the integrity to look at themselves and see who they are, then they won't tolerate it from other people. Again, you know, I'm amazed that we learn nothing from history, and history is merely repeating itself. It was the great crash of '29, the Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War, the Panic of '08, the Great Recession/Depression. There's a depression in Greece, a depression in Spain, a depression in Portugal, a depression in Ireland, a depression in England, a depression in Italy. There's a depression in Romania, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Hungary. There are a lot of depressions going on. And now we're looking at currency wars. I don't have to tell you folks over there. You know the problems that you have when your currency gets too high, and you can't export product. Same thing going on with Brazil. There are trade wars going on. Talking about Brazil again and the other BRIC nations, they're kind of angry that China is, and of course, one of the BRICS, but they're undercutting all their manufacturing. What happens after that? World War. World War is on the horizon. When I mentioned Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, UK, look at, last week, a week and a half ago, 100,000 people taking to the streets in Prague. Did that make the news? They call it austerity measures. It's class warfare. The economic systems are breaking down. And to get the people's minds off those problems, they take you to war.
Well, that's a very dire prediction for spring, Gerald Celente. I hope you're wrong on this one. I think millions of people around the world would be agreeing with me. But look, once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.